So fellas, last week I released a video on the worst horror sequels, and as promised, I'm going to cover some that I think are the best horror sequels. These are not ranked in any order, and it's just my opinion, so you don't have to agree. I'm going to start off with an obvious one, and that is the most grooviest film of all time, Evil Dead 2. This film can easily go down as one of the best sequels ever made, and one of the best films ever made. Sam Raimi is at his absolute bloody and cheesy best here. I feel like this film is what put Evil Dead on the map. The first film will always be a classic, but most of the iconic imagery associated with the franchise comes from this film. It's also the film where Ash comes into his own as a character. He starts whipping out legendary one-liners, and he gets his chainsaw hand, which combined with his boomstick, make for the deadliest weapons in horror history. The camera work is also fantastic, and adds to the insane and frantic nature of the film. I like that Evil Dead 2 can be watched as a standalone film and as a sequel. It recaps and remakes the events of the first film, but it removes his friends from the story. But it also directly follows on from the ending of the first film, allowing the film to bring in new fans and to satisfy fans of the original. What's also amazing is that this is a one location film, which is the same location as the first film, and it never gets boring. It's entertaining for the whole runtime. Finally, the ending was also great, with Ash being sent back in time to fight the Deadites as the Chosen One. This film added so much lore to the franchise, and I love it. Next up is Final Destination 2. This is another sequel that I think is better than the original. The first Final Destination was a decent start to the franchise, but I think the second film expands on the premise and has much more interesting characters and better deaths that are more thought out. You can't talk about this film without talking about the pileup in the initial premonition. The stunt work and effects in that sequence are some of the best in not just horror history, but film history. It also plays on everyone's paranoia so well, as there's been countless times where I will be in a car on a motorway, and this sequence will play in my head. This especially happens when I see a logging truck, or a truck carrying anything to be honest. If you can be behind one of them and not have this film flash in your head, then you're too young and need to watch more films. Or maybe you're just a psychopath. I think this film has the most memorable cast of characters within the franchise, and you actually feel for most of them when they die. Kimberly is also a better protagonist than Alex, and probably the best in the franchise. I can't forget mentioning this either. Terrence C. Carson is in this film, the original voice of Kratos. He's such a legend. Final Destination 2 has some of my favourite deaths in the franchise. I'm a big fan of Evan's death, I think that whole sequence is so fun, and Rory the Stoner's death is just really cool too. I love the mix of practical and CGI to create these kills. They really show that CGI should only be used to enhance practical effects. We shouldn't just rely on CGI. I'm looking at you, the Final Destination. We're going for a more modern release now with Terrifier 3. I will admit I do have some bias towards this franchise, as I've been following it from the initial short film, and I had All Hallows Eve on DVD when it released. So finally being able to watch Terrifier 3 when it released in cinema was such a treat. It's been great to see Damien Leone take a short film and turn it into a franchise that absolutely crushed the box office with its third installment. It had a budget of $2 million and made 90 million, which is just insane. It's also great to see how much he has improved as a filmmaker as the series has gone on. This is definitely the most well directed out of the series, and it also has some pretty good cinematography. I really like the shots of Art sitting in that chair within the creepy house near the start of the film. The lighting makes the shots really unnerving. Thanks to the bigger budget, more locations can be used, and the set design is better for those locations. They really did come a long way from the mostly one location of the first film. Also, thanks to the higher budget, the kills get to be more extreme, and the practical effects for them are just amazing. This might seem weird to say, but they did put a smile on my face as it was like seeing old school horror practical effects again. I just loved it. Of course, you can't talk about Terrifier without talking about Art the Clown. David Howard Thornton is perfect in this role, and it's crazy to see how quickly Art has gained iconic status, as he can easily stand with the horror greats. I really liked that in this film he still does have comedic moments, but he never goes too comedic. We've seen that with older horror icons, they become too comedic and become parodies of themselves. However, they know when to hold back with art, and Howard Thornton can easily switch from comedic to terrifying in an instant. I think the brutality of the character definitely helps with that, as art does not hold back. Furthermore, I like the continued development of Sienna Shaw. She is a very badass final girl, and she goes through a lot of beatings and keeps fighting. She's a really good character. I am looking forward to Terrifier 4, which is supposed to be the final installment, and I'm also looking forward to my NECA Art the Clown figure arriving this December. I pre-ordered that as soon as it was available. Back to the classics now, we have Hellbound Hellraiser 2. This is pretty much the only good Hellraiser sequel. I think that might be due to the fact the majority of the cast and crew returned from the first film, so it actually has the same looks and vibes, making it feel like a true sequel. The only difference is Clive Barker did not return to direct this one, but he did write the story for it. I like that the film picks up from the end of the first one, and we see Kirsty Cotton now in a psychiatric hospital, which is where we meet the antagonist, Dr. Channard. I do think he is a really good antagonist, and I love his Cenobite design. The film added a lot to the Hellraiser lore, and it was able to answer some questions that were left by the first film, such as where do the Cenobites come from and who are they? It's cool to see they were once human, but due to their desires they have been turned into Cenobites that work for Leviathan. It was nice to see them gain their humanity back and try to help Kirsty, which separated Pinhead from other horror villains at the time, as he wasn't straight up evil, he had some layers to him, which made the character more interesting. However, later films would just turn him into a generic slasher killer. The depiction of hell being a labyrinth-like world is such a unique and cool way to depict it, and it creates some amazing visuals. I wish the rest of the sequels explored this aspect more, as it's what made the first two films so unique. I will say though, I was annoyed how easily Channard killed the Order of the Gash. He just one-shot them like some cheater with aimbot. Overall, this was a worthy sequel to the first film, and kind of a necessary one, I think. You can easily watch them back to back and leave them as a duology. I'm going to talk about one of my favourites now, and that is Child's Play 2. This is by far my favourite in the franchise. It's a shame Karen Barkley didn't return in this one, as her character is instead in a psychiatric asylum, but we are introduced to another great character with Kyle. I really love the opening to this film. We get to see Chucky being reassembled after the events of the first film, and I think it creates a really satisfying opening sequence. I also like that the film gets straight into it with Chucky, as he is the one we are watching the film for, so there's no waiting around or mystery like the first. We are straight into it and we get to see some good kills. I really love the death of Andy's foster parent Phil, as we get the great one-liner from Chucky with,
"How's it hanging, Phil?"
It's simple, but it makes me laugh every time. The whole ending sequence within the Good Guy Doll factory is just fantastic too. It's such a creative scene, and it's visually so pleasing to look at. The way Chucky has to rip off his hand and replace it with the knife blade is so badass, and I love the look of him when he is covered in the molten plastic. Kevin Yeager did an amazing job with the design, and like the first film, he did a great job with the animatronics. The way they kill Chucky in this one is my favourite too. They just fill him up with plastic until his head expands and explodes. It's awesome. Even if you're not a fan of this film, you can't deny how incredible this sequence is. I will forever preach that Child's Play 2 is the best one in the franchise. It's finally time to talk about some zombies now, with Dawn of the Dead. This has to be by far the most iconic and influential zombie film of all time. It's probably the best zombie film too. It's a bigger and bloodier sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and it shows the zombie apocalypse going global and ruining the rest of society. The idea to set the film in a shopping mall was a genius use of social commentary by Romero to criticize the growing obsession with consumerism, which, as the years have gone on, has only made this film more and more relevant. Zombies are still scary in Dawn of the Dead too. Yeah, they are the classic slow-moving zombies, but they can easily overwhelm you, and they are so ravenous and brutal. Zombies aren't really scary anymore, as they are overused, but within this film, they are still scary and a threat. Credit has to go to Tom Savini, as his work on the makeup effects are mind-blowing. He's really one of the best at creating such gory and memorable effects, which helps show how brutal these zombies can be. It's even more impressive when you look at the budget of the film. Dawn was made on a budget of $640,000, and it looks better than modern films that have hundreds of millions spent on them. Dawn would go on to inspire various forms of media, with Shaun of the Dead, Dead Rising, and Left 4 Dead being some of them. Without Dawn, we simply wouldn't have them. I will also say I don't even hate the Zack Snyder remake. It's nowhere near as good as the original, but it's still a fun time. Next up is A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. This is by far the best out of the Elm Street sequels, and it's the only sequel to have Wes Craven working on it. That's not including A New Nightmare. Frank Darabont, the director of Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, also helped write the screenplay with Craven. Dream Warriors is the true sequel to the first film, as we see the return of Nancy Thompson, who is now an intern therapist at a psychiatric hospital. I've just realised there's 3 films on this list where characters have been sent to a psychiatric hospital. That's so weird. Anyway, she's trying to help the titular Dream Warriors, and it was really nice to see where the character went after the events of the first film, and seeing her trying to help others was a natural route, and it shows how much she has matured. The main character is Kristen Parker, who is portrayed by Patricia Arquette, and she has the power to draw others into her dream. This is where we get the Dream Warriors, as the other characters each have their own powers in their dreams to even the odds against Freddy, even though he does just murk most of them. However, you do actually care for these characters when they die, which is rare for a lot of horror films. The film also creates some scenes of genuine emotion with the death of Nancy and her father Donald. It was such a shock to see her be killed, but it was good to see her get the final stab on Freddy with his own glove. Freddy also strikes the perfect balance between comedy and serious in this one. His kills are often really mean-spirited, with darkly humorous one-liners, such as "Let's get high." And of course, we can't forget "Welcome to prime time, bitch!" I think the franchise could have ended here, and it would have been known as a great horror trilogy. But of course, Studio Greed meant we had more sequels where Freddy would become a meme. For the penultimate entry, we have Wrong Turn 2, Dead End. Within the worst horror sequels video I made, I spoke about how I am biased towards this franchise, due to the first Wrong Turn being my first ever horror film. However, even without being biased, I do think this is a good sequel. The plot focuses on a group of people going to the West Virginia woods to film a reality Survivor TV show. And of course, they end up having to fight for survival against the inbred cannibal hillbillies. I like that this film introduced more of the cannibal family, as in the first film we only had the 3 brothers, and in this we have Pa, Ma, brother and sister, and of course the return of Uncle Threefinger. It's interesting to think that the family of this one were only on the other side of the woods in the first film. I wonder how they reacted to the deaths of Sawtooth and One Eye. Anyway, I think this one has better characters compared to the first film, especially with Henry Rollins playing Dale Murphy. His character was so awesome. It was great to see him take on most of the cannibals. I really like in horror movies where we actually have a smart character who fights back. Unfortunately, he did die near the end, but it was great whilst he lasted. The gore is much better in this one too. The first did have its violent moments, but it's much more tame compared to the rest of the franchise. The film starts with a great kill, with the character Kimberly just getting split in half, and later on we have people getting completely blown up. Wrong Turn 2 does lead more into the trashy side of horror when compared to other films in this list, but you know what, who cares? Sometimes that's all you want and need from a horror film. Finally, we have Creep 2. I've always scrolled past these films on Netflix and never gave them a second thought, but the other day, me and my partner were looking for a horror film to watch, and we thought, why not, we will stick Creep on, and we were captivated. Therefore, we had to watch Creep 2, and we loved it. The sequel does delve more into the psyche of Joseph, now going by Aaron, who was his victim in the first film, which allows for more depth to be explored, and it does lead to some unnerving results. Like the first film, Mark Duplass absolutely carries the film. He is so charismatic and unsettling at the same time. He really is perfect in this role. It really amazes me that both films were made with budgets of like $500 because they are so good and are better than a lot of modern horror films released by big studios. They're also some of the few found footage films that I like. They just have a simple premise and work with it really well. Everything you liked in the first is here in Creep 2, which creates another great film with a super unnerving antagonist and atmosphere. So those are some of the horror sequels that I think are the best, and are worthy of standing amongst the original, and sometimes even surpass them. There were loads I wanted to include on this list, but I couldn't, as it would make the video over an hour long. Also, I know I talk about the classic franchises a lot, it's just that I grew up watching those, but I will start talking about more modern ones, and some lesser known horror films. I am planning a video that focuses on horror films during the 2000s, so if that interests you, stay tuned. Let me know what your favourite horror sequels are, and I will probably include them on a list next Halloween. As usual, thanks for watching, fellas.